part of you working hardest against your goals is the part you have refused to look at. This is not a provocation. Jung documented this mechanism across decades of clinical observation and named it precisely the shadow, not because it is dark or sinister, but because it exists in the region of the psyche deliberately kept out of the light. Every quality you have rejected in yourself, every impulse declared unacceptable in the environment where you formed, every desire that was too dangerous to acknowledge, that material did not disappear when you refused it. It went underground. And from underground, it has been running a quiet operation against every conscious goal you have set since. The pattern that repeats in your life, the relationship that ends the same way every time, the project that collapses at the exact threshold where it was almost everything it was supposed to be, the version of yourself you keep almost becoming and then retreating from, is not random. It is not bad luck. It has a signature, and that signature belongs to something you have been refusing to acknowledge is there. Most people who find themselves inside a repeating pattern eventually arrive at one of two conclusions. The first is external. The circumstances are wrong. The people around them are defective. The system excludes them specifically. The second is internal, but equally limiting. They are the problem. Something fundamental in them is broken. The pattern is evidence of a flaw too deep to correct. Both conclusions have elements of accuracy. Neither is the cause. The pattern is not caused by circumstance alone. It is not caused by a broken character. It is caused by an unintegrated part of the psyche that is carrying something the conscious self refused to carry. And that part has been communicating through the pattern for years, escalating, using increasingly dramatic situations to be heard. The drama is the signal. The repetition is the volume turned up. Jung wrote in 1936 that the shadow is not what we do wrong, it is what we refuse to be. What we refuse to be does not simply go quiet because we stop acknowledging it. The shadow forms in early life. Every child exists in an environment with explicit and implicit rules about what is acceptable. Some qualities are welcomed: the curiosity, the compliance, the social brightness. Others are met with disapproval, shame, or the specific silence that a child reads as danger. The child, whose survival depends entirely on the approval of the environment that sustains them, learns quickly which aspects of themselves to present and which to suppress. The suppressed material does not evaporate. It builds into a parallel identity, a subpersonality carrying all the rejected qualities, the unacknowledged desires, the fear and aggression and grief and need that could not be shown in the original environment. This is the shadow. It is not the enemy. It is the most loyal part of the psyche, loyal, specifically, to a version of survival that was necessary a long time ago. In adulthood, the shadow operates primarily through projection. What cannot be acknowledged internally, the psyche perceives with disproportionate intensity in others. The person who has suppressed their anger identifies everyone around them as aggressive. The person who buried their ambition spends energy resenting those who display it openly. The projection is not a flaw in perception, it is a protection mechanism. By locating the unacceptable material in others, the conscious self avoids having to own it. The cost is that the person's perception of reality becomes systematically distorted in the direction of their shadow content. More consequentially, the shadow engineers situations. This is what Jung meant when he described it as the author of fate. The person who internalized the belief that success makes relationships dangerous will unconsciously create conditions for collapse at the exact moment success becomes available. The person taught that closeness ends in abandonment will consistently choose partners who leave, not because they are unlucky in love, but because the shadow navigates toward what it recognizes, even when recognition means repeating pain. James Hollis, the Jungian analyst who spent 40 years in clinical practice, described this mechanism as the 2-million-year-old self choosing the present. The emotional logic operating in the repeating pattern is not the logic of the adult who can assess the situation clearly. It is the logic of the child who learned what was safe and what was dangerous in an environment that no longer exists. The shadow is not a mistake in the system. It is the system doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect you. The problem is that the definition of protection was written by a child whose survival depended on a specific set of conditions, the particular rules, the particular threats, the particular things that needed to be hidden to ensure connection with the people who provided everything. That definition does not automatically update as you age. Unless the shadow is actively engaged, unless its material is brought into conscious awareness and examined, it continues to operate as if the original conditions still hold. It sabotages the relationship because relationships, in its original programming, required self-erasure to survive. It collapses the success because success, in its formation environment, created isolation or punishment. It returns you to the known pattern because the unknown, even when objectively better, registers in the older systems as threat. The shadow's sabotage is precise. It does not destroy everything. It keeps everything just short of the threshold that would require you to become someone genuinely new. Because becoming someone new is the one thing the shadow was built to prevent, not out of malice, but out of a protection reflex that has never been updated. This is what costs the most. Not the catastrophic failures, the years spent in variations of the same situation, the career that stalls at the same level, the relationships that reach the same depth and go no further, the version of life that is perpetually almost what it should be, close enough to keep you hoping, not enough to satisfy. Integration is not acting out the shadow. This is where most popular descriptions of Jungian psychology go wrong, and the error is significant. Integration does not mean unleashing every suppressed impulse or reclaiming every rejected quality in its raw, unmediated form. Jung was precise about this distinction. Integration means making the shadow conscious, bringing its material into awareness where it can be examined, understood, and negotiated with, rather than unconsciously enacted through the pattern. The first step is recognizing where the shadow speaks loudest. It speaks in disproportionate reaction, the intensity of anger that does not match what actually happened, the depth of shame triggered by ordinary mistakes, the irrational certainty that something good is about to be taken away. Wherever emotional response exceeds logical explanation, shadow material is running. The reaction is not a flaw. It is information about where the unprocessed material sits. The second step is not solving the problem the shadow appears to be creating. It is asking what quality the shadow was protecting when it went underground. What aspect of yourself was so unacceptable in the original environment that it constructed this entire parallel architecture to stay hidden? What did you have to stop being in order to be safe in the place where you formed? The question is not comfortable. It is also not optional. Not if the pattern is going to change. What the work looks like is specific. It is not insight alone. Insight without effect is intellectualization, the psyche's way of examining the shadow at a safe distance while keeping it exactly where it is. The material that went into the shadow in the original environment did not go there because it was unthought. It went there because it was felt, and the feeling was dangerous. To bring it into integration requires feeling it in conditions where the danger is no longer present and tolerating the discomfort of discovering that the original environment no longer sets the terms. Robert Johnson, the Jungian analyst who studied under Emma Jung, described this as the difference between information about the shadow and contact with the shadow. Information changes what you know. Contact changes what you are. The work is not willpower. It is not a better productivity system or a cleaner set of habits. The habits and the productivity and the discipline are all running on top of a deeper operating system that has not been touched. You can optimize the surface indefinitely. The pattern will continue until the material underneath the surface is addressed. The shadow is not the obstacle to your becoming. It is the most important information you have about what becoming would actually require. What becomes available when the shadow is integrated is not freedom from difficulty. It is the end of a specific kind of difficulty. The kind generated by a part of yourself that was trying to protect you from a threat that no longer exists. What replaces it is a different relationship with your own complexity. One in which the material that was driving the pattern from below the surface is now available as capacity, as resource, as the full range of what you actually are, rather than the edited version, the original environment approved. The sabotage does not disappear overnight, but its source becomes visible, and what is visible can be negotiated with, rather than simply endured. The pattern keeps repeating because the shadow keeps repeating what it learned. It keeps repeating because no one has yet sat with it long enough to hear what it is actually trying to communicate. Jung said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate, not as poetry, as clinical description of what happens when the shadow is left to run the operation without interruption. The shadow is still there. It always was. The only question remaining is whether you're willing to stop pretending otherwise.